Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're starting a new series where we're going to go over the basics of Funkoverse and how to become a better player. This video will be for the player who has played just a few games and has an interest in getting a few more sets and possibly improving at the game. In this first video, we're going to go over the general play of Funkoverse. This basically just means that we're not going to be diving too deep into any singular topic, and we'll more or less just skim the surface on multiple different topics. In the future, deep dive videos will go into specific topics, so be on the lookout for those as they come. Now let's go over some general ways to improve at Funkoverse. The first might honestly be the most obvious thing you can do to get better at the game, and that's just to play lots and lots of games. But there are some specific things you need to be on the lookout for when playing the game. The first thing is that even though you might be losing games against a good opponent or even winning games against a bad opponent, you want to be learning from these games and evaluating what you could have done to play better. Knowing how to evaluate a game and being able to think about all the other options you could have made in that game may seem obvious for getting better, but I really can't emphasize enough how important it really is. The next thing that will come from playing a lot of games is that you'll be able to figure out how all the characters in the game really work. You can only get so far just by reading the character cards, and actually playing with and against them will be more beneficial with actually figuring out what they can do ability wise, but also how they play in games. Each character has a unique play style, and it is very important to figure out who is good in each type of situation that will arise. Another thing you should hopefully pick up on is which attachments go well with which characters and teams. I try my best to give some ideas in some of my other videos, but the best way to really learn the attachments is very similar to the characters, and that's just by playing lots and lots of games. I will say that even though I've played a couple hundred games, I'm still learning new things using these points above, so always treat every game as a learning opportunity, and you'll become a better player in no time. The next major thing you can do is know all of the actions you have at your disposal. You will learn what each character can do with time, but you must know all the basic actions and what they can do for you. These are pivotal to the game, and I imagine if you're at this point in the game, you already know these, but basic actions are foundational. You need to know the capabilities of what your character can do when you don't have the ability tokens to perform their actions. Knowing these along with character actions, though, will help you be able to look ahead and try to predict what your opponent will do next. The next thing is to make sure before going into a game that you understand each of the scenarios that exist in the game currently. There's a specific four that I believe if you understand, you'll be able to pick up on all the other one off scenarios much more easily. And the first of those four scenarios we're going to look at is leaders and flags. The main thing you need to learn with leaders is that you can score points in increments of 4, 3, 2, or 1. You really need to make sure that you're interacting with point markers when you can, because those are the only guaranteed points you can get in this scenario. On top of this, you really only want to target the opponent's leader, because even if you cannot get a leader on leader knockout, 3 points is still game changing in the grand scheme of. I would also try to avoid focusing on non leader characters unless you really have to, because at best you can only get 2 points, and you might be potentially putting your own leader in harm's way, which could turn into a net negative for you for the game. On top of all of this, you need to make sure you manage your ability tokens especially well. In this scenario, you need to have higher challenges so you have a better chance of knocking out the rival leader. Flags is a much different scenario from leaders in that instead of relying on challenging to win the game, you're going to rely on your character's mobility to score points. It's important to remember in this scenario that you must be standing adjacent to the flag at the end of a round to gain 2 points. This means that if you make sure that you cannot get knocked down by your opponent, or if you can, you have a character nearby who can assist in the event of that happening, you will always be able to gain those 2 points. It's important to collect point markers on the way to the opponent flag, but you really shouldn't go out of your way to get them. And knocking out your opponent should really only happen when they are targeting your own flag to prevent them from getting 2 points. The other two scenarios of the main four are territory and control. Both territory and control play very similarly in terms of how the scoring works. One thing that will help you the most in these scenarios is to actually focus on the objective and only get point markers if you're ahead or they're not too far out of the way to obtain them. In these scenarios, once you get started, somebody is almost always going to be gaining 2 points per round, and those really add up a lot more quickly than you would think. On top of this, it's important to think about your opening moves in these scenarios, especially because a lot of the times you can set yourself up to satisfy the extra point portion of the scenario in the first round and basically start with a 2-0 lead. This is done by either getting into the territory early or being able to interact with a control marker and it being the only one interacted with in that round. Also, keep in mind that these scenarios rely a lot on character positioning, so please be mindful of that. And if you can knock out a rival easily, you should do it because these scenarios are hard to recover from after getting knocked out. After you have all four of these scenarios down pat, then I would suggest you look on to like scenarios like scrimmage and runners, and then maybe even some of the one off scenarios like croquet and basketball, and improving at those after. When actually playing in games, it's really important to be keeping track of who goes first in the next round. If you went first in this round, then your opponent will go first in the next round. And if they went first in this round, you'll be going first in the next round. And that's usually how it works. The reason this is important is because you need to know how to set yourself up to either play 2 turns in a row or be prepared for your opponent to do the same to you. As an example, say you were the last to go in this round and you will be the first to go in the next round. In this situation, Night King is going to already be exhausted, and Alice is your only unexhausted character. If you wanted to try to knock out Night King in the next round, you could take advantage of turn order by having Alice do a basic move and end adjacent to Night King. Then you could perform one basic challenge before the round ends, and then, now that you're already adjacent to him to start the next round, you get an additional 2 basic challenges to try to knock him out. This is just a very simple example of the point I'm trying to make, but always be on the lookout for opportunities like this to get an advantage over your opponent. A similar topic to having to pay attention to who goes first is to also pay attention if you can start a game in a specific way to gain an advantage. This is very scenario specific, and a lot of times it matters if you go first or second, so be on the lookout if you can get an early advantage in a game as well, especially in scenarios like territory and control. The next major topic we're going to go over is how to build a team. For the most part, I usually just run random teams when playing for fun, but when you're actually trying to compete and win games, you need to try to build the best team that you can. One way to do this is by relying on a team with mostly similar ability token colors. The two characters I have here are an example of what not to do. Iron Man is a red gray character, while Alice is a blue yellow character. This combo would be what we call a rainbow comp, where you have all four of the colors of ability tokens. You really want to try to avoid team comps like this unless you feel more comfortable with the game or both of the characters are really low cost, but even then, I would try to avoid it. Even when it's not a rainbow comp, you want to try to have a balanced team ability cost. In the example above, Iron Man's good abilities are both 4 cost, while Alice only has a 3 and a 2 cost as her highest, so you have some high and some low cost abilities. These somewhat offset each other, but more could be done with the characters you choose, especially ones that have cost reduction, which, similar to Iron Man's trait, I am Iron Man, if you have someone who can reduce the cost, you will have a much more successful team. And there's really a lot of things you can look out for when building a team, but these are just a few of the most important ones for better synergies. The last thing we're going to go over in this video is how to finish out games. One of the major things to remember is that the game does not immediately end when somebody reaches the score needed to win. Most scenarios, the score needed to win is 10 or 6, but even if the opponent reaches this score before you still have a chance to win the game. One way to do this is to at least make sure that you can tie at the end of the round. If you're tied with your opponent at the end of a round, then there will be an extra round, and this will continue until someone ends a round winning the game. Knowing this, as long as you can keep the game going, anything can happen. And even if it looks like you're losing the game, you can sometimes just find a way to roll the dice and test your luck. I can't count the number of games I have won just by figuring out a way to extend the game and winning in overtime. With all of that said, I hope this was a helpful video for everyone and it helps you learn to win more games and become a better player at Funkoverse. Please let me know what topics you'd like me to dive deeper into, and feel free to comment if you have any questions at all. Be sure to check out my other character overview videos if you haven't already, and if you're interested in joining the Funkoverse Discord, that link will be in the description. I'll see you guys in the next video.